evening, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. And I'm here, it's early afternoon on a lovely sunny day in England, talking with you. And it's a delight to be back. It's been a few weeks, I've been traveling and just a busy time. There we go with the word time. Apparently, it's the most popular noun in the Oxford Dictionary, English Dictionary. How about that? Most popular noun. And if you have nothing to do for 5 minutes and twiddling your thumbs and fingers at some point, just see how many expressions, whatever language you think and talk in, surrounds itself with the word time. It's extraordinary, really. I've actually loved, and I use that word sincerely, loved doing these shows. It's been a learning curve for me, and it's just a wonderful way of communicating my knowledge, my authenticity, based on 38 years of my being a professional timing consultant and astrologer. In earlier shows, I talk about how I became that, how I've developed it, what got me very young into wanting to explore what I call the upside down carpet of the sky. When I was a kid, I'd look at the skies and think that's an upside down carpet or a very magical moving ceiling. And then I'd look down at my feet and I'd look at the magical display of nature. It doesn't take long to realize that everything moves very, very quickly, that everything is active. Even in the cold winter months, there's activity happening under the earth. And in the daytime, the stars are up there in their courses. The earth is moving round, we are moving. We're not meant to stand still. Human beings aren't. But let's face it, our minds do, at times. The beauty is knowing when to drop anchor and when to keep going with the flow. Sounds simple in theory, doesn't it? But reality is different. And today I wanted to talk with you about the subject of time and space in our lives. A different way of looking at what we take for granted. I'm not a physicist, though I've talked with them. I'm not an astronaut, an astronomer. I'm just an ordinary human being who's explored a great deal of life in 65 years and seen the beautiful link of as above, so below. That statement was written over the doors of the temples in Delphi in ancient Greece. As above, so below. And indeed, there are fantastic parallels between the cosmos, the geometry of that, and the workings of the little atom. It's funny that the atom, the actual nucleus of it, is incredibly heavy. But most of it is surrounded by space. It's tiny, but it's surrounded by space. And in fact, if you were to take all that little bit of the nucleus, the heaviness, out of the elephant, you'd be left with space. It's mainly empty. How do you feel about the word empty? It has a lot of emotive connotations. Maybe we can find a better word. Maybe space, a gap. It's a difference perhaps between walking through a very dense, overgrown, cluttered wood. Can't even see where you're going. There's space there. There's trees. There's plants. And walking through a nice glade where there's plenty of life, nature going on, but the sunlight, the space to move. And I wonder how often we allow that in our own lives. More and more I hear people saying to me that time is going very fast. I'm going to be writing about this, talking about it in my book coming out in later December, which you'll hear more about. Why is time appearing to be speeding up? And some of you will have heard me mention before that if we're not in bodies, and I do believe in a soul, there's no time or space. It's in our three-dimensional world that we create that. And therefore, is it rocket science to believe, to think, to know that we actually affect time? The more we can expand our own consciousness, the more we are in alignment with it. We've all known times where it just goes just like a thought, like a feather in the wind. And other times when you think time has gone past, and it isn't as though you're bored, but you think, oh my goodness, only half an hour has gone by. Time is very odd. It's a good title unto itself, isn't it? There are two types of time. There's the linear, past, present, future. Physics sometimes say, well, is that even true? Einstein talked about that. Is all time happening now? Of course, if we really resonated with that, I think we'd start to think we'd lost our marbles. We'd become very confused. We have to kind of structure it. Somebody once said that the past is dead, the future is yet unborn, and the present is where we should nourish being alive. I like that. Sometimes, though, we do misfile the past into a shelf in the future. Very easy to do. Again, Einstein, you cannot blame him. We can actually thank him for a great many quotes because he was such a wise man as well as a wonderful scientist. He said the time we need timing to stop everything from happening at once. It's like watching a play which has its own beautiful rhythm and on and off cues of actors, and somehow they're all getting confused on stage at the same go, all talking at once. So it's quite a funny analogy, that. But our minds can often have everything happen at once. And we do live in a very, very busy technological age. Due to the Schumann resonance, a way of measuring the electromagnetic field of the Earth, things do appear to be speeding up, and we are opening up. We are opening up to a greater sense of awareness, which is actually quite enabling us to be more multidimensional, to be sensitive to other dimensions, but at the same time can give quite a lot of anxiety, particularly if we're not in alignment with our own inner timing. So time can be chronological. Have you thought about where that word comes from? It comes from the Greek god Kronos, the Roman counterpart, the Greek counterpart, I should say, of the Roman Saturn. And we often talk about a Saturnine person, a bit ponderous, a bit of a wet blanket, taking its time. It's been called Father Time. And just a wonderful painting by the artist Goya, which one can see, of course, in museums and so on, where we have a picture of Saturn, Father Time, gobbling up his children. He was so afraid of them superseding him. And Saturn rules time. It was the boundary of our solar system up to 3 centuries ago. Well, in a sense it wasn't, but it's what we could see with the naked eye before telescopes. So that was our reality. When a new planet is discovered, it brings a new consciousness into being within ourselves, collectively. And we do gobble up time, or we hold on to it. As I say, we can misfile the past into a shelf in the future. There's another form of time called Kairos, K-A-I-R-O-S. The Greeks had that word. They were a pretty creative bunch, weren't they, the ancient Greeks? And Kairos was the right point in time, the quality of time, rather than the quantity. Which is beautiful, because when we sometimes get lost in time, you get out of your own way. I don't know about how many of you, but I know as a child growing up at school in the late 50s, 60s, that I was a dreamer, daydreamer, and that was really criticised. And you'd look out the window, whether you were bored with the class or not, the dreamer in you. Or you'd read a book and get lost in that imagination. It was criticised. And I do believe that the dreamer in us, this is ruled in astrology by the planet Neptune, god of the ocean, the connectedness of everything, the flow. The symbol is the chalice, the openness to source. And yes, we need our left hemisphere brains, we need our brains to adapt and to work in this world, and it's wonderful, of course. But it's so important to honour our right hemisphere brains, the intuition, the patterns, to meditate, to be in touch with that very current word, mindfulness, to be present, the gift, and to allow in what we can all share from the universe. The skills we get from it, the words we use to describe it are individual to us, and that's lovely too. It's interesting that we quite often fear chaos, and yet nature needs some chaos. The body needs chaos. It can't be in perfect rhythm or balance. It needs that little bit of chaos, we're told. And quite often creative people are accused of being a bit messy or creative. Messy with their creativity and a bit of chaos sometimes around how they work. And yet, when we can shuffle things up in that way, it's like moving the earth so things can grow more easily. It can't just be pristine, allowing things just to grow all the time. We have to cut them back. We have to see what's going on underneath sometimes. But the word chaos in its original meaning meant gap. So the gap between time and space, the gap between the worlds. In many cultures, certainly here in what we call the Celtic lands, we have, at the end of this month of October, Halloween, hallow meaning holy, when we honour the dead. Well, we know that all the rituals that go on are very much not that. It's about ghouls and ghosts and that kind of thing. And trick and treat in the American way of saying things. But the Celtic people in the past knew a lot about this. They knew that was the time of the crack between the worlds opening, when we do have access to other dimensions. Maybe there were ghosts there, but I feel as we move toward the end of this month and into early November, the Celtic New Year indeed was the 1st of November. Going through that transformation, opening up to a greater sense of self. It was like a new year, a new birth. Each of our birthdays is like the next new year of our lives. It's a lovely thought, isn't it? And just as something is set into motion, at that moment of birth, cycles start operating in the heavens within ourselves, which we can follow and work with. So each birthday as it comes around can also very much be used for that. The quality of the moment, the quality of that moment, does time become stretched out? Is it shorter? How does it operate? Try it sometime when you're having a quality moment. Quality time. How does time feel? When we get somehow out of time, meaning in a good sense, being lost in time, quite magical things can happen. I'm meaning the word magical in the purest sense of that word. Children understand magic. We say something is magical when it's a lovely surprise. Synchronicities, serendipity, the right moment steps in. We often know when we're on the right track, when we get lots of interesting omens and signs, nature around us, or that phone call comes in just when we're thinking of someone, and things start to fall into place. I know for myself, many years ago, well, it seems many years ago now, I was about 12, and my life changed tremendously. And in many ways, I let go the old me completely. I needed to. So I didn't write even any clauses in about expectation. I certainly wasn't a victim, but I handed it over to life. And I found that magically everything started falling into place. It felt like being enlightened without being enlightened, if that makes any sense. Synchronicities was a word coined by the great psychologist Carl Jung. And he called it meaningful coincidences. When the time is right, those things align. Synchronicities. The right person turns up to help us. And often we do push the tide, don't we? And when we push the tide, are we surprised when our timing goes off kilter, when there aren't those synchronicities? Intervals and spaces run through nature, and let's face it, they run through music. The pauses are just as important as the activity. If we didn't have the stillness, the pause, in dance, in music, in speaking, then it would be a very poor planet, I think, and a poor creative experience. It's important that we allow and trust those intervals and spaces in our lives. The world will not forget us, no matter how busy we are. If we take a pause, a quality, even 5 minutes of quality time out, we come back renewed. Great speakers understand the importance of pausing between words without it being uncomfortable for themselves or for the listeners. In healthy conversations, that is always the case. The space is powerful, and I really like to honour the sacred spaces between things we do and say. In the dark, things germinate easily. Photography develops in the dark. Try having a tricky conversation more in a darkened space than in the light. Sometimes it flows better, more honesty comes through. While we're in bodies, we are beings of natural cycles. We have inner diaries. We have inner timekeepers. I've talked about this many times. And it was easier when our lives were tied up with the diurnal cycles in nature, when there was more ritual in life. Difficult, isn't it, in our modern world? All our commitments, all the Wi-Fi electromagnetic fields going on around us. I try to be aware of choosing to be open and vibrating to the gaps which are there to be noticed and listened to. Moments outside time, when time seems to stand still and we're lost in it, are powerful. Soul time spreads out and a lot happens. I mentioned the Schumann resonance, global electric magnetism, and its frequency of 7.8 hertz has speeded up in the last few years with the increased beta, not just alpha and theta energies. And they're making us more alert, and as I mentioned, they're making us at times more dizzy and confused, because waking up to new perceptions can be scary. It's easier for children, isn't it? Because you have to keep growing. So we do need to raise our own frequencies and honor time in a calm, but essentially an aware way, awareness. It's very easy to experience love outside of time. We don't think of it like that, do we? But in a sense, it is outside of time. Where there's hate, usually stemming from mistrust, constricts and worry, it scars our use of time and space. But love, like water, can be permeable, softening forms. We can fall in love with nature, with music, with many things, not just a person. But it needs trust and space to grow. In his beautiful book, The Prophet, by Kahlil Gibran, which I really recommend you read if you haven't already, he writes on love, but let there be spaces in your togetherness. and let the winds of heaven dance between you. When we infuse that magical word love into what we do, it alters our perception of our three-dimensional time-space existence. And oh my goodness, it opens us, it really does, to a bigger framework where the visible and invisible meet. The word paradise means beyond division. How about that? And in that place, we can feel, I believe, the flow of kindly time's mystery by valuing ourselves and, of course, others in equal measure. I think this is a wonderful time in our rather turbulent world. This has been a very strange year for feeling uncertainty, but it's never been a better time to make friends with time and space and use them wisely and with love. Today we're leaving the sign of Libra, entering the sign of Scorpio tonight in the Western Hemisphere. And Libra is a sign of balance. And whenever we get to the last degree of a zodiac sign, it's a time to kind of catch up with oneself. Maybe the energy is a little tired, things don't flow the way they should. We really shouldn't overdo things. A kind of releasing of things that we've been working on the last 4 weeks. Ready for new beginnings, transformation. I've really enjoyed talking with you. And I hope this has been insightful, that you've been able to nod your heads a few times and say, yes, this is what I've been feeling, what I'd like to do. I look forward very much to talking with you again soon. So I'll say goodbye for now.